Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. This would be the Jeff Cameron Show right here on 97.9 ESPN Radio. Thanks so much for tuning to it. Hope you're well on a Lawn Maintenance Tuesday. I'm Jeff, that's Tom. We're online, ESPNTallahassee.com. Go there to listen live via the streaming free always. Don't miss anything. Sometimes you do, I understand. If that happens, you go back, get caught up. We post the show, all 3 hours of it every day upon the conclusion. They're on iTunes where you can rate, review, share with others. We really appreciate all those 5-star reviews. It helps others find the show. We also post it on the archived audio or in the archived audio on our webpage. JCS at 979, ESPNradio.com is the email. At Jay Cameron Show, Twitter. Hello, YouTubers. Hello, Periscopers. I was hoping to wake up really on the verge of announcing that I feel like there's a great shift in attitude towards this game Saturday. Didn't happen. Won't dwell on it. Didn't feel any better about our chances this Saturday against Clemson than I did yesterday or Sunday evening.
Good luck with that, Clemson.
Yeah. Nope, no changes there. None whatsoever. You know, if anything, you know what I found myself doing for the first time, and I really have to fight these feelings off because they're not healthy, and it doesn't do you any good. I found myself revisiting my frustrations and aggravations and a bit of the disdain that I felt for Jimbo as he left, because we're really in a situation where when I look at the root of what's happened the last 3 years, you can't help but go back and realize the way that he turned his back on a program, leaving it in such desperate shape. Now, Willie has his own problems to deal with, and criticisms can follow. But the truth is, where I lose hope when I try to size up a way that Florida State can make this game interesting is it's quickly leveled. That thought is quickly eliminated by the dire set of circumstances we see with the offensive line against Clemson's defensive line. And at the root of that is Jimbo Fisher and Rick Trickett, and a delinquent duty in which, for whatever reason, with family issues and frustrations and behind-the-scenes troubles, he decided to stop recruiting the position completely. It's a dereliction of duty, and Florida State finds themselves in this horrific position. Now, that's a big picture, faraway look at how we arrived at where we did, and it doesn't do us any good to go back and relitigate that and have these issues. We've already done it ad nauseum. But that's the feeling I felt this morning when I got up. I woke up very early, as I'm prone to do, even earlier this time around. I don't know why. And I just kept thinking, well, maybe we could do this, and maybe, Clemson hasn't looked good here. And I was going through all of that rhetoric, and I just kept coming back to that one thing. And that doesn't change. And also the quandary that Florida State finds themselves in is they have to play fast. They can't play slow, and because they can't play slow, they can't shorten the game. They can't limit possessions. They have to play a game of more possessions, not less possessions. And playing more possessions against a team that is more talented than you are across the board doesn't lend itself to this game being very competitive or very close. So that's the hard part for me, Tom, is that ordinarily I'd say, well, you can hope to win the turnover battle. You can try to win the hidden yards and special teams and things like that. You can play smart football and not commit penalties. Play smart within yourself, play field position, whatever it might be. But that's the strategy when you're the lesser talented team and you have an offense conducive to shortening games. And maybe you're relying on an elite defense or something. Well, Florida State doesn't have an elite defense. Their corners aren't very good. Our offensive line is terrible. And the only way to offset that disadvantage is that you have to play fast and mitigate those concerns physically by winning on first down with tempo and then kickstarting your offense that way. And I just can't help but get into that feeling that if doing that means that they get Clemson, that is, 14, 15, 16 possessions, you're screwed.
Well, the good thing is Clemson might eviscerate the offensive line, but if you get the ball out of your hands immediately, you mitigate some of that. And you can move the pocket around and do some gadget things that might be able to manufacture 2 or 3 drives for you that take some significant chunks of the clock, or at least they flip field position a little bit. And our receivers on the perimeter against their secondary, listen, they've got a really good secondary. They're really good at every single position group.
Yeah.
But if you throw the ball up in one-on-one matchups to some of our athletes on the perimeter,
yeah, you might make enough plays.
We might win a couple of those battles.
I think you probably will.
Sure. So can you do all of those things and stack that house of cards together in order to make it happen to the tune of a close game at halftime?
Yeah, and it's hard. And then I try to take away from that what's a win, and it's just against my DNA, your DNA, anybody who's competitive and loves their school and all that to have to sit here and talk in those terms. But that's where we are today. It's where we were last week. It's where we are in general as a program, is to talk in terms of offsetting, the damage of a loss with, well, might you get a moral victory here? Might it be a closer loss than expected, than the experts think, than Vegas has laid down with a 27.5-point line?
Yeah, but the problem is yelling about it and screaming about it like some fans do is like yelling at the sun for rising. Sure. It's going to happen. This offensive line just isn't any good, and it's not going to get better in the short term. You might be able to do some things to scheme around it. You feel better about having a cohesive plan, right? Like this guy puts it together.
Plans, yeah.
So Brent Venables said yesterday is the difference between last year's running game and this year's running game is they have a plan. That's an indictment from year to year if I've ever heard one. But it's true. It feels a little bit more organized. The thing that's killing me, though, is in previous weeks, if you just do want to get into the details for a brief moment, pre-snap penalties and alignment penalties. You can't have that. And we have those at home, not in that type of atmosphere, with the adrenaline pumping and the crowd noise confusing your mind because it sounds like a jet going over your head. We got to be better about that, that's for sure, because if you're going to have any chance at all to flip field position and play a game that's somewhat competitive, you can't be getting in 1st and 15 or 2nd and 7 after an 8-yard run on first down because we can't line up or we can't stay in our position before we jump early on the offensive line.
Yeah. So what does it look like? It looks like 34 to 21. That's what a good game, well played, gave yourself a fighting chance. Walk out of there with your head held high, still feeling good about your chances on the road against Wake Forest, coming home and winning games against Syracuse and Miami. That's what kind of score. I mean, I'm just ballparking. I'm spitballing here. I'm just telling you something in that neighborhood would make you feel like there's real momentum. Otherwise, 59 to 10 or whatever it was, I mean, that's...
My hope is the defensive backs. I do think somewhere in there is a real talent to cover, and I know what the evidence says. Like, I don't think all of these kids that we picked up on the recruiting trail are terrible. I don't think they were all misses. My hope is that fear of being embarrassed puts them in better positions if they're in isolation, man-on-man coverage, than they've shown so far this season. And I think Willie's banking on that, too, with his message in the press conference yesterday saying that we play equal to the level of competition.
Yeah.
First of all, that's bull you-know-what, because that's an indictment on yourself and the coaching staff having these kids prepared mentally to go week to week. But in this case, for this week, if that is in fact true, then we should see some performances that might be different, let's just say, to be kind.
Well, straight up better. But there are two factors and two elements of what he said there and what you're saying here that I want to address. First of all, I would say that, and I don't know how this will be perceived over there in the athletic office, but it's gibberish. I think Willie's at a place where he feels burned by the national and local press, where he feels frustrated by the way the team's been covered. I think he probably, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, my opinion, which is a given, the name of the show is The Jeff Cameron Show, but I want to make it clear that Willie hasn't said anything. This is what I have derived from my interviews with him and from what I'm observing, is that he doesn't really want to talk to the press. He has to. And he's not in love with the media right now, which some of the things that have been written, about Willie Taggart have been unfair. Some of the things, observations made nationally, are uniquely vitriolic towards Florida State's program, Willie Taggart's coaching, given the same lack of success in other places with second-year coaches. Like, we've seen some of that. Nebraska's not competitive either. They get their ass kicked all the time. Ohio State could have named that score. They could have won that game by 100 points. It was 38-0 before you knew it, right? And I don't hear anything about Scott Frost. Now, I'll grant you, context matters. He took a team that was winless at UCF and turned around and went undefeated. So in their eyes, the national media is saying you get a greater grace period because you have done it. But he's achieved nothing at Nebraska. They suck to high heaven, and they're not any better than they were a year ago. Not at all. In fact, they're taking a step back offensively. But they're not talked about that way. And I think so, if I'm coming at it from his perspective, Chip Kelly and UCLA, I mean, Florida State's bigger than UCLA, so you're going to get a lion's share of coverage over UCLA. But they're terrible, too. Just gave up 48 to Oregon State at home. I think he probably is like, well, now, wait a minute here. Do you guys realize I couldn't run off the players I needed to run off because the APR scores were so bad with the other guy who just turned his back on an entire program and stopped recruiting the offensive line? Do you realize what I'm trying to salvage here? If I look at it from that standpoint, I look at it as a guy who's embittered, but that doesn't play well. He can't talk like that, so he doesn't say that, but he's not going to say anything. So right now, his answers, they're just kind of get me through this. He's not telling you anything. He's not saying anything. I just think he says things, maybe even things that were suggested in the question. Like, well, yeah, I think maybe we're emotional. We play up one week, down the next week. I mean, I don't even know what that means. I don't think he even realizes when he's saying it that doesn't really portray you in a great light.
No, it doesn't.
No.
No, when I heard that comment yesterday, and Ira brought it up too in the interview at 4 o'clock, I thought, really? Well, whose responsibility is that to get the kids to play at a certain level week in and week out?
But it's also, if he had just taken the time to think about it, not true. They didn't play up to Clemson last year. They got beat 59-10.
No, I think he's talking about this year's group. They played down to ULM. They played down, I guess, to NC State in that previous game because the offense looked like crap, first half especially.
I just don't think they're very good. I mean, I think they play like a team that's not very good.
Yeah.
I think they play like a team that's got a bad offensive line. That's how teams with bad offensive lines play, inconsistently.
And I think that plays so poorly, though. If you're truly embittered by the media because of a couple of bad clippings, listen, the standard was set to be high last year. And also, if it's about the transcript thing of the Monday Night Coaches Show, that's your coach's show, and you said the words you said you didn't say. So
I know. I
mean,
get that
Jesus.
it plays. And again, he hasn't said that. So I want to make that abundantly clear.
Yeah.
He has not said that. He has not said one time that he feels cheated by the media. He has not even implied that he's felt that way.
The media, there have been some unfair pieces. I'm trying to be down the middle here. But the other thing is Scott Frost did say last year this is going to be garbage, and the track record from Nebraska the previous 10 years says, woo, that's a repair job that, I mean, the likes of which he hasn't seen yet.
But one thing to note, and I'm talking about, yes, it's not Scott Frost's fault the way he's covered.
No, and he's failing this year, also to be on balance.
But what I would argue here is that Nebraska was preseason ranked top 25. When you watch College Game Day, I mean, they had Martinez, an outside Heisman candidate.
Yep.
All of that was absurd, first of all, just absurd. But having said that, when you watch College Game Day, if you're going to measure it to those expectations, they don't talk about Nebraska the same way they talk about Florida State. Florida State had zero expectations coming into this year. They were horrible last year, 5-7.
And they made the most disappointing segment. Yeah, I know.
It's so I get where you'd be like, what in the hell?
Well, they're a clown show every year. I mean, you had Desmond Howard having Brett Hundley and UCLA play Miami for a title a handful of years ago.
Yeah, I know. And
it's not just Corso from being, detached. Like, they're all detached from reality at times.
Well, and it's a show. It literally is a show.
Exactly.
I got it. There's placating. There's a lot of understanding regionally where they are in the given Saturday, what plays to that audience.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's a show. It's an engineered show. And coaches should know that, too, and should be cognizant when things seem a little
When
slight.
Jimbo got mad at the media, you're like, dude, pay attention to what you're supposed to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And I agree across the board. If things aren't going well, it's what he's preached about his team, to his team the last year and a half. If you're not playing well, guess what? They aren't going to say very nice things about you.
And again, the last thing I'll say on this is he has not suggested it. I do think that there are signs he's a little embittered, not necessarily at you or me or any one person, just in general, this sort of sense that FSU is treated differently. And certainly our fan base believes that. I understand that. I mean, I think to some extent, that's born out of the Jameis era. That's still leftover anger towards all of that.
I think that's 100% fair, but it's not just the national media he doesn't have time for. He doesn't have time for the local group. You can see it in practice availabilities during the week.
No.
The way he answers questions by many, not just one or two outlets, but I'd say a handful. You could see that he's over it before he's even answering the question.
Yeah.
And he just has to go through the motions. That's not the same thing. And we should know that and remember that as a fan base from the Jameis saga. The local media covered that very differently than the national media. These are two different entities. Willie doesn't have time for the local guys, is what I see.
I think some of that's because of a show like this one, or perhaps Wake Up War Chant, or the War Chant Report, or Seminole Headlines, or the Democrat, or any. It's that in his mind, all of those outlets have at various points been critical. What I would tell him is, yeah, you've lost a lot of games. This is what happens when you lose a lot of games.
What are we, 8 and 9 so far? I mean, listen, and we also say the past few weeks, and indeed this whole season, we said you can argue that we've gotten better every week.
Yeah.
Like noticeably better in certain details
The
of the game.
response after the UL Monroe game was a great response. Everybody should have been very excited by the way they went and played against Virginia. They should have been mortified, humiliated that it took a missed extra point to survive UL Monroe. And then you go and play Virginia the way you did as an underdog on the road at night, and you play well. Probably should have won the football game. That shows me growth. That's where I have hope moving forward. There's plenty of positive that we've also latched on. Yeah.
Special teams in a lot of ways has looked better.
Yeah. It's a shame. It's a shame because it's not a good look. It's something that I think he needs to be mindful of. He might not even be mindful of it. You know, I get it, man. If I'm absolutely under the gun and I know my team is probably on the verge of taking a beating. I've watched that film if I'm him. Yeah. I know what the hell Clemson is.
But, you know, this should be a really positive 2 weeks if you're in that camp. And the reason I say that
and maybe it has been.
And look at the crowd for Louisville and look at the crowd for NC State. People showed back up. That's important. I know it's Parents' Weekend, but it didn't have to be that crowded just because it was Parents' Weekend.
It's because they had won the previous game with all the talk of attendance and all that. They did win that game, and they did show you a little moxie in the fourth quarter to win that game. And then people said, well, that's progress. You know, between Virginia and Louisville, we've seen progress. And then they went out and they housed NC State. They look bad for a quarter, but they overcome their deficiencies, and they house NC State. And you know what? That, too, is real progress. So, you know, can you maintain this sense of progress? You know, again, I hate not being in a position to talk about actually winning the game, but show me continued progress here.
Yeah, it's an average to below average football team right now that the ceiling with the talent on a given week, they can rise up and make some things interesting because they do have top-end talent.
Could that be this week?
Probably not, but would be cool.
Could that be this week? It's the Jeff Cameron Show.
Sorry, boys, I did not have time to pack.
We got this.
It's right here, guys.
We got this.
I thought I could handle it.
We got this.
Moving doesn't have to be a hassle. Call us first at 2 Men on a Truck. No matter the move, home or business, we'll make it a smooth one.
I forgot something.
We got this.
You referenced it, but then I wanted to go read it. Thankfully, you had it, and I just read it. How about that little weird maze? This from Matt Connolly. He works for the state newspaper. That sounds weird to say. Clemson beat writer for the state newspaper. And he got a quote from Brent Venables that, oof. I mean, goodness gracious.
Oh!
Okay, so we've sounded already pretty dire. And I'm going to tell you now because I know how Seminole Headline sounds.
Uh-oh.
It, too, is going to sound very dire.
Does it really?
I just did the War Chant report today with Corey Clark and Gene Williams and myself. It, too, sounds very dire. I think the more that you dive into the game, if you're trying to be objective and you're a realist and you're pragmatic, the more likely you are to come away from looking at the matchups and saying, yeah, no, we're not going to be very good in this game. Now, where I think there's wiggle room for argument and where the optimists could win out here, and I sure hope that's true, is that Florida State will come into this game with more confidence than they had a year ago. They certainly, I just got done talking about it, I think they play for each other more than they did a year ago. They like one another. They're playing hard. And they've got some players up front that might stymie this Clemson run game and make them one-dimensional. And that gives you a fighting chance to make this an interesting game, especially if Trevor's going to lock in on guys. He's got 5 interceptions this year. He threw 4 all of last year. He's already got 5. He hasn't looked great. They've been hell-bent on throwing to the outside of the hashes instead of the middle of the field. They've forgotten about ATN for long stretches at a time. So who knows? Maybe they kind of go through the motions again. North Carolina shouldn't have kept that game close.
Yeah. You give Levitt 2 weeks to create specific rules for the matchup.
Right. So there is a way. I may have sounded like I saw no way. There is a way where maybe, just maybe, you put game pressure on Clemson. And I think that's the whole thing here. Get them thinking about it. Now listen.
Get their crowd going. Here we go again.
Well, and maybe, hey, listen, maybe they do panic. Maybe they aren't the same team. I mean, they've won a lot. You know, guys get complacent. It can happen. We saw it happen in 2014 for different reasons, but it happened. Things can go wrong, especially when guys have other things on their mind. So who knows? If you get a game into a second half where it's relatively close, all of the pressure in this situation is not on Florida State. It's all on Clemson. Clemson has a lot to lose. We don't. So, yeah, okay, I'll give you that. But here's something to feel positive about. Despite all of what I just said, with everything sounding dire and most of our segments, if you're tuning in and out, saying, well, Jesus, guys, you're going to make it sound like it's 63-0 at the end of the third. I really don't need to sit around for this. Hey, listen, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you something I don't believe. I don't think Florida State's going to make this game all that interesting. So I'm not going to come do a show in which I say I think they make that all that interesting. Take solace in this. Me and anybody else who does this for a living, we're not always right. There you go. Happens all the time. You know, you misread a game. The game's still played by human beings. They can turn it over 4 times in the first half. Well, the next thing you know, holy hell, it's 21-0 Florida State. What's going on here?
No.
Highly unlikely. I still wouldn't pick us to win.
No.
I'd in-game wager Clemson in that moment because I'd get incredible odds. But that's an aside made by a degenerate. But,
well, listen, man. We have big leads against Boise and ULM, too, so we'd be in a familiar position. Could we show the maturity that we didn't have at Doak Campbell Stadium?
Here's the positive aspect of all of this. And in this, I mean, it's hurtful to hear, but it's not wrong, and it is something where you go, that's true. That's true. Per Matt Connolly getting the quote from Brent Venables on what Kendall Briles has brought to the Florida State offense. Quote, unquote, the run game's different. There's a plan.
Oh!
That's a toughie. That's oof. Walt Bell and crew didn't
have a plan.
Didn't have a plan, no. That appears to be true. No real plan. No definitive plan.
Well, see, what Venables does, guys. Venables schemes against the thing you do best, and he's got a specific answer. So if we don't do anything, he can't scheme anything.
It is rather random.
Huh?
It's like a guy who's effectively wild.
Try it on.
We
Try it
have
on.
seen 9 walk no-hitters. Don't get comfortable in the box.
So forget the Syracuse game on the road. We've got to do this in order to give ourselves a chance against Venables.
A.J. Burnett could miss at your head. Don't dig in. This is, hey, we may run a double reverse. You don't know. Could be right up the gut 3 plays in a row. Anything is possible.
We may not block you. What
Yeah.
do you do
What
with
do you
that?
do with that?
What do you do with
What
that?
if you're just free running in at our guys? What do you think of them apples?
You might think there's a screen coming, but there isn't.
No.
So when you're really confused,
It's just that you're overwhelmingly better than our offensive line.
that's when we get back to the line of scrimmage. 2nd and 10.
2nd and
We're
10.
now ahead of the chains.
Yeah. How do you deal with that kind of adversity, boys?
2018 offense I'm speaking of.
Yeah.
2nd and 10's ahead of the chains.
Very different. Brent Venables on what Kendall Briles has brought to the Florida State offense. Quote, the run game's different. There's a plan. Okay, then. That's positive. We have a plan, Tommy.
It's all about Snuggy Hill.
Take it. You take that damn hill next week. Coming off of a moral victory against Clemson, you take the hill, inspired by a relatively close lopsided loss. It's the Jeff Cameron Show.
Sorry, boys, I did not have time to pack.
We got this.
It's right here, guys.
We got this.
I thought I could handle it.
We got this.
Moving doesn't have to be a hassle. Call us first at 2 Men and a Truck. No matter the move, home or business, we'll make it a smooth one.
I forgot something.
We got this.
All right, so coming up, you'll hear Seminole headlines taking you from 4 to 6. And then later on tonight, Rays prohibitive underdogs for the matchup tonight. I think I saw, an astronomical number at one point. I think it was Verlander and the Astros minus 250, minus 350.
I know it's not the same thing, and it's something we laugh at, a measure that we laugh at often, but according to ESPN's FPI,
right,
I believe it's
we do laugh at that.
94-6 split. Clemson 94%, us 6%.
Okay, in football, okay.
It is on the level with Duke and Georgia Tech, also Colorado and Oregon. Oregon has about a 94 to 96% chance to win.
It's kind of curious, and I would just say this about that. Colorado played, tough the other day, and the other thing is Oregon looked terrible in their 17-7 win. Cal was with their backup quarterback, was a seriously diminished team, and that game's close well into the second half.
According to the FBI, South Carolina has a better chance to beat Georgia than we do on the road at Clemson. Just odd. I see that because it's part of that Caesars scrolling thing on the TV feed of all of our radio programs that you can get ESPN News during the day.
Well, listen, over the next 2 hours, you're going to hear a lot of talk about, what's a win for Florida State, because it's not a win. The game becomes about how do you look? Do you continue to show signs of growth? Was the growth that we witnessed against Louisville and NC State real? Or is it just that Louisville's terrible, NC State's worse? Our defense isn't that much better. It's just that they played two bad teams. In the case of Louisville, who's continuing to score against other people now, I think you would say Florida State did play better defense. I don't think NC State's going to move the ball against much this year. Their quarterbacks are terrible. I don't know. I'm struggling with what I think. Here's what I know. I know this team is mentally tougher than they were a year ago. I think they're more together than they were a year ago. They like each other more. They play for each other more. I think that's real. That's a real talking point. And why is that a real talking point? Well, the reason it is it seems to me that would suggest buy-in. That would suggest you got rid of some bad apples too, but buy-in into what the coaching staff is telling them and belief in what they're telling them long-term, it's going to be successful. No team, and certainly not athletes of this caliber, go into games thinking they're going to lose. So, in my mind, this group goes in Saturday believing they're going to win. It doesn't matter that you and I don't think really it's a remote possibility. They'll believe that they're going to win. What happens if they get absolutely shattered the way that they did last year? Lest we forget they lost 59-10. Dabo Swinney put his son in the game. They were laughing, scoffing, chuckling at this thing that Florida State had become. I mean, literally on the sidelines, their coaching staff was laughing at us in our stadium. If it happens again, despite what I just said, do they fall to pieces? I hope the answer is no. Yesterday, we talked about it with Ira. We seem to suggest that we don't think that they'll fall to pieces. They seem to be tougher than that. But I don't know. I mean, if you get blown out, does it undo whatever confidence has been engendered through these last two wins?
Nothing will change my stance on the fact that this team is tougher until Wake Forest is played. So they could get blown out, and we could have that discussion with a worried tone from today through the end of the week. And then we can have that discussion next week if a blowout occurs from Monday through Friday. But my answer, personally, is always going to be the same. They've had plenty of chances to do so already. So I don't think that's who they are. But if Wake Forest's performance looks like the Syracuse game last year or something along those lines where first sign of trouble, we pack it in, then I'll revise the stance.
Yeah, until that time.
But we can't know that until we play Wake, let alone this game.
Well, it's weird, too, to describe this game off and on this week as the one that's in the way of the Wake game. I look at the schedule differently than I have in years past. Normally, you'd circle the Clemson game. You'd circle the Miami and the Florida games. You might circle one other big-name team on the schedule if they were there. But I look at this game as like a nuisance game, and it just shows you the difference in the two programs and the directions that they've gone the last 3 years. Florida State is 15-15 in their last 30 games. We are a bad football program. Several of those wins are against garbage teams like Samford and Louisiana Monroe twice. An FCS went in there. I mean, they're 15-15. Clemson, meanwhile, has won 2 of the last 3 national championships.
Those numbers aren't going to improve for a couple of years if you look at 30-game windows, too. They just can't. We got too many losses banked up, and they're backloaded.
Well, it's also because your offensive line is ass sorry. That's the truth. That's really where that is the offensive line is so bad that when you play decent to good teams, you can't really win. You can't. It's, we've talked about this before. At wide receiver, Florida State's good against anybody on this schedule, including Clemson. I like Clemson's receivers more than ours, but not by a lot. Not by a lot. I like our receivers. I think they're really talented. And if you took these receivers and put them on Clemson's team with that offensive line and Trevor Lawrence throwing the ball, they'd put up huge numbers. They'd be great. They'd be elite. They're good for us now. And I think you see the skill of a Tamorian Terry and you realize how great he can be. I like our tight ends. I like our running backs. I really do. In particular, our starting running back. He's a star. He's really, really good as a complete back. He is those things. He's not as explosive as some backs we've had or even ATN is at Clemson, but he's better in pass protection. He's tougher at at finishing runs. He's a complete back. I can do this. I can play this game, and I can find areas where we do match up with elite teams. But the line of scrimmage isn't one of them, in particular on the offensive line. And that's where it's just dire.
Well, and if you want to be doomsday about that part of it, which is easy to do, and objectively it's where we are right now, is a doomsday scenario from, let's just say, the 2014-2015 period of time when, things were kind of slowly starting to deteriorate, but you thought, well, it can't get that bad at this position. Yeah, it can. The reinforcements, they're not there right now. It's not like you got Dante. And then it's what?
You did hit a home run with him.
But there are
Chaz
5.
Neal's coming.
There are 5.
Chaz Neal's coming, buddy.
Okay.
Well, but how do you change that? There's no quick fix to the offensive line. It is brutal.
Pancakes.
Yeah. Cheating is a reality here that we need to consider. It could be a shirt.
I mean, the Walker kid commits to Florida over the weekend, and he at least he told their site down there, you know how these things can be. And that's our top tackle target left on the board. And now he's off the board. He says he's not coming to the Miami game. He was originally scheduled to come here November 2nd, Florida State, Miami, for an official visit, and that was our chance to put our hat back into the ring. But after the weekend concluded in Gainesville, he said, I'm not going to make that trip to Tallahassee. I've committed to Florida, and that's that. So what do you have left? JUCOs. Yeah. And here we go again with the JUCOs.
Yeah, I don't know what you do about it, though. It's really a terrible rut that you're in. I mean, you got to go JUCO in some ways, even though you don't love to do it. But you've developed a reputation as not being a destination for offensive linemen. In the same way that when Florida was losing games, they couldn't get receivers. They'd get a guy here or there in the same way we get a Dante Lucas, but they couldn't get receivers. You'd look over there and you go, how does Florida not have receivers?
Yeah.
Right now, when you look at us, you just can't get offensive linemen. And you've got to undo that. You've got to find a way to break that spell. You've got to get kids in here.
Well, and the problem is, too, if I'm a recruiter for another program, position coach, or I'm that ace guy that goes out on the trail, I'm telling offensive linemen, Randy Clements ain't going to be there but one more year tops anyway. So you might like him, and you know what? He will make you better. He won't be there, though. And what can Florida State say to that? That these guys are long-term solutions at the coordinator role? Kendall being coordinator, of course, and Randy at the position? I mean, we don't even expect that here. We think one more year max. I mean, it's almost like if you want to be desperate about it, you got to give them a raise and give them a reason to stick around early before they even have a chance to leave for the next big job.
Yeah, I don't know what you do. I mean, you look at this commitment list, Tom. You're not wrong, man. That 2020 commitment list.
No, it's terrible.
Well, here's what it is. It's really good, except for offensive line, right?
Oh, I'm talking about specifically offensive line.
You got one guy, one real guy that you go, okay, well, we got that guy, and he's a 3-star offensive lineman.
Better be a hit.
You better, yeah. I don't know what you do about it.
No tackles. 0. It's a bad place, and again, if I'm Florida or Clemson or whoever, first of all, I can say look at the record, And then I could say, Kendall's great, man, and he's going to be a really good head coach somewhere. But
he won't be there for you.
He won't be there for you. So don't even consider them.
Yeah. Great. DB, running back, linebacker, wide receiver, linebacker, running back. They are doing something about their linebacker problems, though. That's for sure.
Oh, and that was addressed early in the offseason.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
you
did
get
a
to the
good
middle,
job with that. They
the
did a
middle
good job
of the
with that.
summer. And then you got Levitt to cash in on that, hopefully, at the end of the year. And you say, all right, now you've got a position coach plus talent coming in. We're not going to ruin you before we have a chance to reap the rewards of your skill set. Yeah, they did a great job in that regard. But
And it's
O-line
important. Yeah.
is, you got problems. You need to hit a home run with a grad transfer or a JUCO transfer. At least one.
And then cheat your ass off. Pancakes for days. You go get the top 2 or 3 offensive linemen in the country. You do it.
You better have $800,000 to $1 million to go get you the next offensive line coach when we have this issue either this December or the one after that.
I think there are good offensive line coaches out there. You got to have you're right. Get your money squared away and go get one. You got one right now, but you're right. He's gone the second that Kendall leaves. In fact, you need to be planning for that future anyhow. You need to have a guy, an underling to Kendall right now, who can learn this system. If you plan on maintaining this system, which I imagine you're invested in.
Yeah,
so.
I think if you're going to play the NFL injury game with Kendall Briles being here next year, you'll say probable. He's probably
I
here.
think almost certainly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got a lot of time to prepare
Mm-hmm.
in case he says, you know what, the head coaching job at West Virginia is open, or someplace where he can do a Power 5 gig for 2 or 3 years and then climb up the ranks even higher. But Clemens goes with him the moment that happens. And I'm sure they know that, but past behavior and past track record suggests that maybe sometimes we're a little bit more blindsided than we should be on some certain things.
So that's a hell of a way to end the show.
But as for this season, these guys, I don't think they're going to quit. Wake Forest will tell us that tale. And shoot, if they play this game close this weekend, and by that I mean 14 to 20 points, that's the margin at the end of the game, there's no way they quit. They're probably more invested.
Well, and I think it's very important. How you play, what that score is, the way it looks, all that's very important to meeting the goal that we're talking about here. Giving yourself a chance to go on and have a good season relative to this year's expectations, which would mean you beat Wake on the road, you come home, you beat Syracuse, you avenged the 2 narrow losses to Miami over the last 2 years. Should have won last year going away. They don't look very good right now. BC can't defend right now, so I don't feel as concerned with that game as I did earlier in the season. You've got Alabama State you're going to beat. You've got a legitimate chance to string together, 4 out of 5 or something like that, and give yourself a fighting chance to feel good about yourselves and recruit in the offseason. And then you can convince a couple of offensive linemen, hey, we're getting better.
Yeah.
Look at our offensive production. We're turning things around. Come be part of that.
Especially if it's a grad transfer. Let's say they got a year to go, which that's the case for 90% of grad transfers. It doesn't matter if Clemens isn't here in a year or beyond a year more.
Right.
Because the year that matters to him, they'll be together and he gets a chance. And on balance, like short-term wise, the rest of the season, I feel okay about things. Not great, but I certainly don't feel terrible the way I did this time last year. It's just if you're looking at that long-term projection and you're saying, is it going to get better in the trenches? There's no proof that it's going to get any better anytime soon in the trenches because no answers are on the way.
All the proof is born of victories, winning season, buzz, momentum surrounding a program that you could, with a straight face, enter a recruit, an offensive line recruits home and say, we're turning it around. Miami's not any good. Look, you're not going to get the 5-star kid. He's going to Clemson in Alabama. Obviously, Landon Dickerson would have made a difference this year, a very big difference this year. Now he's steady kicking ass at Alabama. We butchered that situation, clearly. Now, he couldn't stay healthy, but he's miraculously healthy there and whooping ass. Anyhow, point is, you did lose that kid. He did transfer, and he's not helping you, but you got to go find the next guy or two.
We wanted to play him at tackle. I think he was about done with that.
Well, he was frustrated by lots of things here, and he had a right to be, and it's disappointing. But give the new guys reasons to believe and buy in. That only happens if you play tough this weekend, then you go on and string together some wins. That's kind of where the head's at in Florida State Clemson week. It's not a good place. It's not cool to be talking about Florida State Clemson in any way in which you're not actually entertaining the idea of winning the game. We're not even entertaining the idea of winning the game. None of us are. Now, there are fans who are, and God bless you, man. That's amazing that you've watched us, and you can entertain that idea.
It's something, yeah. It's something. I mean, and you know what? 1 out of 100 times, you'd be right.
And it does happen.
Maybe
Weird
5.
things happen.
According to FPI, 5 or 6 times out of 100, you'd be right.
Yeah, FBI is a joke, though. But yeah, you're right. I mean, crazy things happen. North Carolina had no business.
Yep.
So
Pitt did.
Right,
You know,
right.
It was
strange things can happen.
that was in Clemson, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was, yeah. But, I mean, so crazy things happen, and if they don't take you seriously, and they might not be. I mean, look at them. They're going through the motions on offense. Defensively, they're top 10 still. That's another problem.
No, that's the thing is that, the defense is the one that gets all the helmet stickers after that North Carolina game.
Because they played well.
They're on the field the whole damn game.
Yeah, they've played well from start to finish in almost every game this year. They have. It's just, maybe their offense will take it easy.
The kid we interviewed,
Hang in there.
good player, Tanner Muse.
Yeah, he's really good. Had a strong belief in their defense, didn't he? And himself. He was confident. Had a right to be. Had a right to be.
That one-liner from Brent Venables on the running game,
Yeah,
that's a winner.
Good work out of you. Good work, Matthew. Seminole headlines from 4 to 6. And then tonight, Rays trying to pull off a shocker and force a Game 5. Wouldn't that be? All the pressure would be. I know they've got right there in their back pocket Garrett Cole waiting, but.
Well, that'd be 3 Game 5s in a 2-game span, buddy, and we got 2 of them tomorrow right here on these airwaves.
Get it on. Only the Twins got humiliated again.
If they play the Yankees, that's how it ends.
Well, anybody. They've lost 16 straight postseason games. I don't even know how that's possible. It's just like, what are we doing? It makes me mad because I like the Twins.
Not winning playoff games.
Ever.